So we'll get started. I'll just introduce people. I'm Bob Garner from Environmental, and this is our regular webinar we do each month, and we always find a fantastic speaker who gives us a great insight into some aspect of sustainability and how it might relate to short-term rentals. So I hope you'll learn a lot from this. We've also got Zeke on the call, and Zeke's going to be looking after admin. So if you've got any questions, post them in the chat. If there's any links, Zeke will post them and keep us all up to date. And we've also got Hannah as well, who writes our blogs and does all our amazing writing. And she'll be keeping a note of anything really crucial that we've missed in our education so far on this subject. We have done a couple of blogs on this subject. Well, we've done one, and Dan did a guest one just recently. So I would encourage people to go back and look at those blogs, and that will hopefully reinforce some of the messages that Dan's going to be giving today. So that's fantastic. So I'll pass over to Dan from MotherTree to introduce himself and get started, and we'll do questions at the end. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah. Hi, Bob. Hi, everyone. Really great to join you on this fantastic webinar. So I'm Dan Sherrard-Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of MotherTree. Our mission is to make it really easy for values-led businesses to go green and save money on their finances and their bills. So we cover 6 key areas. We cover current accounts, savings accounts, pensions, investments, insurance, and energy. And we work with all kinds of businesses, from one-person bands all the way up to our biggest client that we work with has 900 employees, and they put 30 billion through their banks, which is a nice problem to have. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the power of your bank and your pension, which is arguably 2 of the biggest drivers that you have to reduce carbon in your business. If you're sitting on a bit of cash for a short-term rental, that can contribute a lot of carbon in terms of the business footprint, and we'll go through how that applies for banks and pensions. It's also one of the ways that we can really change society for the better. So it's a way to get money into places that genuinely promote biodiversity, that reduce the gender pay gap, many other areas that go into creating a healthy, vibrant society. And we've seen with clients that we're able to save money, not only carbon, but save money, and also get money to places that really support their values while unlocking investment as well for a few clients. So I am gonna, would it be all right to share some slides, Bob? Is that all right? Is that the kind of vibe of the meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So let me just grab my slide deck. That's probably the one we want. And let me see if I can just share my screen. Share screen. There we go. Right, I'm just going to hit slideshow. Okay, so a little bit about MotherTree. So really talks about our values. We've saved businesses over 450 tons of carbon so far. And we've shifted, it's well over 200, so it's well over 2 million into the green economy since we started. My co-founder and I, so Craig Wallington is my co-founder. That's him bottom right, that's me bottom left. That's my son Theo, a little bit about him later on. So Craig's background, he's got 10 plus years experience in professional services, most of that 7+ years at Bain & Co. He's also a qualified chartered accountant, which is another way of saying he's the numbers guy. He really gets the data and the details. For my side, I was on the founding team and look after my bills. So we had the best ever deal on Dragon's Den. We saved the British public £127 million in 3 years, and we switched energy for over 800,000 UK households. It was actually while working at Look After My Bills that the first sort of thoughts of MotherTree came about. And really when my wife was pregnant, we've now got a 2-year-old Theo. You can see him here. He looks a little bit older than that now. And it really made me question, where I was spending my time and what I could do to create a world that I'd be proud for Theo to grow up in. And my story goes a little bit further back than that. So when I was 12, sitting in a geography class, hearing about climate change for the first time. And I actually grew up in Swansea on the edge of Gower. And I don't know if you've been to Gower, beautiful place. Maybe you got some short-term rentals there. Beautiful place to be. Golden sand beaches, dramatic cliffs. My wife, I like to say they're the best beaches in the world. My wife says they're the best beaches in my world. It makes me sound like I haven't traveled, but it is a spectacular place to be. But I was sitting at 12 years old in a geography class, and I realized that without dramatic change, we'd lose this beautiful part of the world within my lifetime. I didn't know what to do about it then, but that feeling stuck with me. And when Theo was born, that was when the two kind of pieces came together. And I left my comfortable job at Look After My Bills, and I started researching, how could I contribute? I started interviewing CEOs, CFOs, sustainability professionals, and just normal people in terms of how they're dealing with the climate crisis. What are they doing? What are they not doing? We've actually held over 400 hours now of interviews with people. We've conducted thousands of carbon footprints, carbon calculations, and we've discovered that there are two actions, just making sure your bank and your pension are invested ethically, have a huge implication for the world we're going to get in the next 10 to 30 years, and for the carbon emissions that your business and personally you are responsible for. For me, when I left Look After My Bills and I started doing these interviews, it was my wife who came up with the idea of something called the Climate Challenge, which was back then groups of 8 people over a month, basically for me, 3 focus groups, but for the people involved, a chance to discover ways to live more sustainably. 30 tasks, 30 days. We went vegan for the day. We got rid of single-use plastic. We looked at our carbon footprint. And 2 things above all else really shocked the people going through it, me included. The first Climate Challenge, some of these tasks were new for me. I found out where my bank was putting its money and also where my pension was going. And it was a real shock. 2% of my pension was going to BP and Shell, 1% to British American tobacco, 1% to weapons, just things that I'd never choose to invest in. And yet every month would look after my bills and my jobs before that. Some of my hard-earned cash had been going to these places. And at the same time, I looked at where Look After My Bills were banking while we were growing that company. We were with Lloyds, and Lloyds have put £12 billion into fossil fuels since 2016. So well over $1 million a year, $1 billion, much more than $1 million, well over $1 million, $1 billion a year going into fossil fuels just through that bank. And that's where we've really focused our research and our time in terms of figuring out what does that mean for businesses in the UK and also further afield. And we found some shocking results. So the UK's big 5 banks have invested 27 billion into oil and gas last year alone. Those big 5 banks, Barclays, HSBC, Lloyds, NatWest, and Santander, and their affiliated brands like First Direct for HSBC. That's who I was with when I first started this journey. It was a real shock to see that they're putting roughly 10 billion a year into oil and gas every year. Other brands that this includes, so Halifax for Lloyds or RBS for NatWest. And it doesn't stop at the UK banks. For the world's 60 biggest banks, put 50 times more into fossil fuel expansion than the fossil fuel companies themselves. To put that another way, for every pound that BP and Shell put into fossil fuel expansion, the world's biggest banks, the 60 biggest banks, are putting in £50. Now, this has an implication for businesses because where a business keeps its cash has a carbon footprint as a result of what these banks are doing. We looked at Google. Google have $130 billion in cash in their banks. What a wonderful problem to have. It's for paying employees, for acquisitions, for tax purposes. And based on how those banks are investing, that cash has a carbon footprint. In fact, that carbon footprint is twice as big as Google and their entire supply chain's carbon footprint. So in short, money really is the oxygen that keeps fossil fuel burning. This is the Google carbon footprint, twice as big as their reported emissions when you include their cash. And what applies to Google also applies to many other companies. We've seen Apple. They've made some wonderful announcements recently. You might have seen the video of Tim Cook meeting Mother Nature. I thought it was a brilliant video, but they didn't mention their cash. Their cash, when it's included in their reported emissions, including their supply chain, increases their emissions base by 3.9 times. For PayPal, who move money from A to B. I'm sure you might well have used PayPal to move money. They hold a disproportionate amount of cash to their other operations. It's 57 times higher, their carbon footprint, when you include their cash. And even for businesses that aren't tech-based, something like Johnson & Johnson, I'm sure you've used their shampoos. Well, when you include their cash, it's 1.2 times higher than their reported emissions. So, we thought, well, this is just for the big brands. They're storing money for acquisitions and so forth. They're sitting on a bunch of cash. That can't apply for your average company. So we looked at ONS data, and we found out that the average UK company has 10 employees. And we took a some cross-section in terms of the work that they do. So obviously different sectors produce different amounts of carbon emissions, but we took a cross-section for the UK. And for the UK, the typical UK company, the average UK company, produces about 75 tons a year for their activities and for their supply chain. When you add in the cash, it adds another 75 tons. It doubles the footprint. Exactly the same impact as Google. And we found that that's really similar for pensions. So for pensions, worldwide, there's 37.37 trillion in pensions. That's about 7% of the global economy. It's about 50% of global GDP, if we set any store by that number anymore, which I hope we don't. That money has a huge chance to change the world that we live in. And the truth is, if you have a pension, or if you're responsible for your employees' pension, then you have skin in this game in terms of how it's invested. The UK pension providers continue to put money into oil and gas, just like the UK banks. In fact, last year, they put 10 times more into bonds and equities issued by fossil fuel companies than they did into FTSE 350 clean energy stock. And those actions have another important impact for our carbon emissions of our companies. When we add in the pension carbon emissions, it adds another 41 tons to the average UK company profile. In fact, Craig, my co-founder, wants to put that number up. We're underestimating that number, we think. But every number that we produce, we only provide once we're super confident in it, and we would rather underestimate than overestimate at this point. So it has a huge impact for our emissions. But here's the really good news. It actually pays to go green. So as of the 21st of September, and actually we could probably update this, as of the 10th of October, we've seen that interest rates for greener banks like Virgin Money and Triodos have outperformed the traditional banks like Barclays and HSBC. In fact, Triodos have outperformed Barclays on interest rate every single year they've been in the UK market. And we could extend this bar chart on the left out to include all the big five, and you'd see a very similar trend in terms of interest rates. This applies for businesses as well as individuals. And it's a very similar trend for fund performance for our pensions. When we looked at ESG funds and we verified that they were genuinely ESG, that meant BP weren't sneaking in there for their good governance. We wouldn't analyze that fund. And we compared that performance to the default fund for the same pension providers like Scottish Widows and Aviva. And a default fund, if you've got a pension from an employer and you've never looked at where it's invested, it's highly likely that you're in the default fund for that provider. Well, the ESG funds have performed 15% better over the last 5 years. Now, I just want to stress that's not financial advice. We're looking at historical performance. But isn't that kind of crazy? We get less money for the more carbon dioxide that we put into the world. And we thought, well, armed with this information, companies would switch, clients would switch. But the truth is, we have an endless to-do list. I don't know about you, but I certainly feel like this lady at times, really, for her, it's an in tray. For me, it's an inbox, but just an endless to-do list of tasks that actually looking at our bank and pension just doesn't get anywhere near the top. And it's so rare that it gets done, even though you can save money and dramatically reduce carbon, it just doesn't get near. And that's why we created MotherTree. So we work with values-led businesses on 6 key areas: current accounts, savings accounts, pensions, investments, insurance, and energy, to really find the best deals that match your values, that save you money and reduce carbon. How we do that? We do the MPS method. That's M for measure, P for prioritize, and S for switch. First up, we measure where you currently are. And it's really important for us to understand before being understood. It'd be strange to go into a doctor and for him to just immediately prescribe you some pills. No, that doctor would diagnose you first, take time to understand what's going on. A good doctor would, at least. And so that's what we do. We really take time to understand what's going on for your business in terms of returns, but also in terms of carbon and your values. And that allows us to then prioritize. We look at all the market, we're completely independent, and we can prioritize where are the best interest rates and where are the best potential returns. You can never promise better returns. We can look at historic performance. Where are there carbon reduction possibilities, and where can we align to values? And that allows us to draw up a plan and prioritize with you where we can start to switch. And once you're happy with that, we go and switch. We draw on the knowledge from Look After My Bills to take all the effort away on your part. We do all the work, we do all the legwork, all the paperwork. It takes about 2 hours for a founder's input, and on a 6-week process, that's what we do. And just to bring it to life in terms of value, so we work with a digital ads agency run by 2 female founders, brilliant Emma and Amy. And when we started talking to them, it turned out they've never had a female boss between them, which is ludicrous. They recruit out of prisons and out of foster care. So their whole thing is about equality, like the words on a stick of rock, about equality. But when we looked at their banks were investing billions of pounds into all white male boards, all white male C-suites, and businesses without a gender equality policy. So we worked with Emma and Amy, and we switched their money to banks that have gender equality policies, that are investing billions into diverse and equal boards and C-suite level. We've actually saved the money, and we've reduced carbon as well. So that's how we bring the kind of values to life. It leads to some significant benefits. We've seen it lead to happier employees, because you're able to say, you do what you say you're going to do. You're true to your values. In short, you have integrity. That leads to happier employees. We see that time and time again. And for the same reasons, it leads to happier clients, maybe even happier letters. They know they're going to a sustainable property that genuinely has set up every part of its business to be sustainable. It walks the walk. And in fact, for some clients, we've even unlocked more investment. Investors love the fact that businesses are able to look after their cash in a responsible way. And for our typical UK business with those 10 employees, well, at least a shift of £400,000 into the green economy. It saves about 75 tons of carbon, and we save about £6,500 per year. And that's just on savings accounts and current accounts. That's not looking at things like pensions and investments. We wouldn't want to predict the future on those sides. What I'd say is, if you're interested, if this has piqued your interest, head to mymothertree.com/business and have a look at the B2B money carbon calculator. It's completely free to use. If it's okay with Bob and Hannah and Zeke, I'll post the link up as well after this, after the presentation comes down. But it's completely free to use. It takes about 2 minutes to fill in. Even if you just put sort of rough figures in, you can get a really good gauge in terms of what the carbon impact is of your money, of your bank and your pension. And we're able to do that. We look at where banks are investing. We look at where pensions are investing. We draw on data from experts like Mike Berners-Lee. He actually he's one of our backers of our company through his service, Small World Consulting. So we draw on expert data sets to give you, a best guess. We never say it's fully accurate. No, if anybody's promising you accuracy on carbon, then I'd question them. But to give you a best guess in terms of what's happening with your money and the carbon output. And if it's not in the place that you want it, if you think it can be greener, then get in touch. 15, 20-minute call. We can quickly figure out if there's a better place for you in terms of that, to unlock it, interest rates, but also to reduce carbon and, to really walk the walk when it comes to your employees and your clients. Thank you so much for listening. I'll pass back to Bob for questions and observations.
Yeah, super. Thank you, Dan. That was really interesting. Even though I know that subject reasonably well, I always learn something every time. So that's always a mark of a great presentation. I've got a few questions, but first let's pass over to other people. And if anybody's got a question, do you want to speak up or post it in the chat if you prefer? Just moving the chat out of the way. I'll ask a question while people are thinking. It's interesting, Dan, that you obviously you talk a lot about the finances, the current accounts, the bank accounts, the savings accounts, the investments, but you also have the energy side. And the reason that piques one of my interests is because when I get asked, as I do every single day, what can a short-term rental owner do for their property to make it more sustainable? The very first thing I always say, without fail, is switch your energy provider. Is that what you mean when you talk about energy in this context, or is there something else?
Yes, that's exactly it. So we would look at what your usage is for that property. We'd then be able to match that with various energy suppliers' pricing, because they all price at different usages. They're trying to capture different parts of the market. And then we'd look at the energy mix within that energy provider. So, the best providers are generating their own energy because they can verify this is genuinely green. The next best is providers that buy certificates. You might have heard the term ROCs, renewable obligation certificates. Those are providers that have basically bought a promissory note to say we're going to put this money towards green energy in the future. It's not as good because that means they're buying fossil fuel now, and then obviously the worst providers are the ones not even buying those certificates. So we would do that research for the client. And yeah, I would say if you want to just do it on your own, that's great. Go and look for a green provider. Do that. That is a really great step. The next step would be to understand what's the usage of your property. And there's various ways that we can do that, because once we know the usage, we can start to talk to the green providers to get a specific quote for the client. So we might be able to, get a bit more of a saving by doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly a subject we should probably delve into a little bit more deeply. And I'm looking to Hannah to keep that on track there, because we do talk about, the importance of the energy, your carbon footprint. It's a significant part of your carbon footprint. But we don't really go into a lot of detail when we're talking to people about how to do that, other than talking to their energy provider or switching energy provider to find the best ones. But there's obviously some more nuance there. So we'll pick up on that and educate people and point them in your direction, which leads on to my next question then. I mean, obviously you're based in the UK, you have a lot of UK clients, but we have an international audience. Are you able to help them, or would you point them in the direction of somebody who would?
Yes, so we're international. We have clients in Denmark, in the USA, leading charity in the USA, Switzerland. So we've got clients all over the world, Australia. So yeah, international. Most of our sort of outward facing stuff is UK for now. We need to get around to changing the website, but in truth, we're fully booked through October, and actually we've only got 2 spaces left in November. We're fully booked in January. So we're kind of just making sure we can deliver really, and what I want to make sure is we can deliver high level for our clients. We could take on more clients in October, but the level we can deliver for clients would drop. Yeah, I refuse to do that. Hence why we're there. So we will get time to update the website and make it clear that we're international. So I totally understand, Bob, why there's that UK slant to it. That's where we started, but this applies worldwide, and yeah, we are worldwide. But equally, if you didn't want to go with our service, then do at the very least make sure you're looking at what the bank is saying in terms of their green policy. They'll do that in the yearly report. That's the first step. They almost all talk a better talk than they walk, which is we're then able to really look at the investment side. But as a first step, just have a look at what the bank is saying.
Yeah, sure. And one more question for me, and then I'll come back to everybody else in case they've got questions. Then, obviously, in short-term rentals in our industry, we've got people of all different sizes. There might be just one person who's renting out one property. There might be a property manager with loads and loads of properties, hundreds of properties. There might be a service provider who's providing content, tech content to our industry. So our audience is very wide. Is there a typical size of business or individual that you need before you'll work with them? Are you happy to work with people of whatever size or whatever background? Does that matter to you? Is there any restrictions that we should know about?
I love this question. Thank you. So the thing that unites our clients is values. So we work with clients who, one person bands. She's actually a brilliant founder running restaurants. We work with, our biggest client has 900 employees. So it's a real range, and all sectors. We have fintechs, we have charities, we have digital marketing agencies, all sorts of sectors, estate agents. And the thing that binds them all together is that they're values led. So we actually turn away clients who haven't got those sort of clear values, integrity, transparency, fairness to customers, but also willing to do the right thing in terms of carbon. So for me, it's really important that we work with those aligned clients. And I've been down that road before. I've taken on all sorts of different clients. And actually, it kind of, I don't know if you found this, it kind of sucks your energy a bit when you work with clients who haven't got those shared values. But when you work with clients with those values, it's uplifting. It's actually fun to do that work. So we're really clear. It's about values, and that's what binds our customers together.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because one of the things that I talk about a lot in our industry, and what our industry is really focused on, is repeat guests, repeat customers who come back again and again, because they're the customers who haven't cost you any money in terms of marketing, because they've liked it the first time and they've come back again and they've recommended it to their friends and family. And one of the things that I find, for my business here in Italy, that works really well, and why we get such a high repeat rate, is there is that alignment of values, that they come and they see that what you're trying to do with your business, and being ethical, giving back to the community, being supportive, being ethical, is perfectly aligned with what they're interested in. And that makes a lot of sense. And they feel like they're coming home. So that sort of value rapport, I think, is a really, really interesting point. I'd like to open up. Have people got questions? I have more questions, but have other people got questions that they'd like to raise?
There's been a couple of things mentioned in the chat, and Dan's been replying. But it's more like people have just been super thankful for this information. I think it goes to show that the talk is good enough, that it's got all the information people want to know.
Sorry.
What I would say, if people reflect, just get in touch, dan@mymothertree.com or on LinkedIn. If you have a question like after this, more than happy to answer it when, some people like to reflect on these things. Sorry, Hannah, I spoke over you. No, it's okay.
I just had a quick question about how far down their sustainability journey most of your clients are. Are a lot of them doing this as sort of the first key step, or are a lot of them already doing a lot of other things and this is sort of fairly far down the line?
It's a real mix. So we've got people right at the start of that journey who have basically realized, 99% of their footprint is their choice of bank. So they're saying, well, why do anything else? We should just change bank to begin with. And then we've got others who have done everything else and they're like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, hang on a minute. Have you looked at your bank? Have you looked at your pension? So we have a real range on that. And I think that's great. I think people pick up the sustainability journey at different points. And I'm all for that. I don't think there's a kind of one size, one route fits all. I think each company is different, each individual is different, and what they want to focus on is different. And that's great. We'll meet the client where they are.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the things we're trying to communicate at Environmental as well, is like, you don't have to be at a certain point already to start engaging with this stuff. Like, just taking that first step is a big step in itself.
Totally.
It really is.
Totally. One of the other things, Dan, that always interests me, and something I mention, is that when an organization, a business, even as an individual, but really we're talking about businesses here, they take some ethical steps and they move away from fossil fuels and into renewables and doing the right thing with their pension and their savings and everything else. It also has a reflection of your brand and how your brand is perceived externally. And I wondered if you had something to say about that, because people often do stuff but then they don't talk about it, and we call that green hushing. When people are doing things but they're not saying what they're doing, it's green hushing. And I'm constantly saying, shout about it, scream about it, put it on your website, write a blog about it, tell your customers, because it enhances your brand. It's something really positive and you shouldn't be shy about it. And would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. So part of the thing, we do with clients is we work on the marketing and the messaging and the story that we tell employees, that we tell potential clients, and also the channels that we're going to use to do that, whether that's LinkedIn or Instagram, or, you know, we create a really, for one client recently, a brilliant client, we made a professional video by a director at the BBC, and put it together, all the great stuff that they're doing, and then looking at how finance impacts that as well. And so, yeah, we really work with clients. How do we tell that story in the best way? Because I think, you know, this is such an important change to make. It seems quite simple, change the bank, but the implications are huge in terms of what's happening behind the scenes and what that means for companies that are going to thrive in the next 10 to 30 years. And we should absolutely shout about that, because the more people who do it, the more pressure we put on the banks that are putting billions into fossil fuels. And I'll give you one story. So Barclays chairman, chap called Nigel Higgins, he's ultimately responsible for Barclays net zero targets, which is set for 2050. He's going to be 97 in 2050. It's not his problem. The way we make it his problem is by talking his language, which is pounds and customers. And if we can get enough pounds, and if we can get enough customers out of banks like that, then I'm hoping people like Nigel will wake up and put me out of a job, because they're already so ethical. That would be a great end game for MotherTree in this.
Yeah, totally. And I've just got one more question, really. Is there a typical route that people take when they come to you? You mentioned before that you try to really understand where they are and understand their motivation and what their key topics are. Is there a typical journey that one of your customers takes? Obviously, everybody's an individual, but you touch them in a number of ways through their investments and then with energy as well. Can you describe that journey and so people can sort of sense, if they get in touch with you, what's likely to happen?
Yeah, I thank you for this question. That's great. Yeah, well, we call it the MPS method. So M for measure, P for prioritize, S for switch. And first up, we measure where you currently are. And often with clients, they're doing one of the things really well. So they might already be with an energy provider that's super green. Well, obviously I don't want to do work that doesn't add value to the client. So we wouldn't look at energy in that sense. So that measurement phase is really the point where we're understanding the business, but also understanding where we can genuinely add value for the client. Once we've got that locked in and we have a solid understanding of it, we move to prioritization. And I've kind of talked about this, but then we're able to look at all of market and really get an understanding for each, I call them products, but for current accounts, for savings accounts, for pensions, where are the providers that are going to match the values, they're going to reduce the carbon and lead to more money in the pocket. And that allows us to look at the trade-offs and the plan for each of those products. And then we switch once the client's sort of comfortable with it. We do the paperwork. What can change for clients is some of them want to do it all up front, and they're like, just give it to me straight. What's the impact for all the areas, and just get it done as quick as you can. That's fine for some. Others want to sequence it. Is that a word? They want to do one at a time. Right. So it's like, okay, well, let's focus on banks now, and then in a month or 2 months, once they're comfortable with what's going on with their bank, we then focus on the next piece. So we're kind of layering it that way. The one other thing I would say is, because we look at values, so we're able to look at carbon, but we also look at biodiversity and gender pay gap and so forth, clean water. Sometimes what happens is we'll do the research, and the client will say, look, I really want to know about carbon. But in 3 months' time, they say, hang on, something's changed, and I also want to know about reducing the gender pay gap. And then we layer that additional value into the work. So it evolves with the client. We move at the client's pace, but MPS is the 3 letters to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And I know the answer to this, but I will ask it anyway. I'm sure it's something that people worry about when they are potentially switching providers of services, that there won't be an interruption of service, and that whatever they're doing, whoever they're working with, they'll all continue and there won't be any massive disruption. I guess that must be a question you get asked and you give reassurance on regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we totally get each business has, different business requirements. There's a reason they chose HSBC as their business bank, and now it's plugged into all their providers. That is hassle to switch. And that's one of the reasons why founders and CEOs and CFOs won't make that jump. So we do that for them. We hunt down all of the activity that's going on the bank. We make sure that those sort of threads are picked up, that it integrates with the accounting software, those kind of, those business requirements that are absolutely as important to make this thing impactful for the business. So yeah, we make sure we smooth that over. The other thing to just mention is security. Security and safety of the money is absolutely important as well. So we're looking at every single bank in terms of, and pension providers, in terms of the security measures and what safety measures do they have in place to safeguard that money, whether it's FSCS protection, or there's other elements that can be in play. So we're really making sure on the business requirements side is as sort of high up the priority list as getting a good return and reducing carbon.
Yep, totally. Well, this has been a fantastic discussion and presentation. And I just want to ask one more time, is there anybody that does have a question? Because this is your last opportunity, because we'll be closing shortly. Anything else that you've got Dan here? He's ready to answer your question. If there's anything you'd like to know.
I have a question. So Dan, are you saying that you tailor the values of the banking choices that your clients can make based on their specific values? So you mentioned equality, and you mentioned carbon, and you mentioned all these things. Like, is it kind of tailor-made for every single client?
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty rare that two clients pick the same things. So every single time we do it, it's really bespoke, tailored research for you. And there's lots of reasons behind that, but your appetite for risk, your appetite for security, your values that you hold close, your willingness to get more returns, and does that mean a trade-off for carbon? Like, we really go into depth on that, so you get that clarity, but it does tend to be for each client. Yeah,
that sounds like a really cool service to provide, because I don't know, so someone could care not that much about one particular ethical concern, but they could really value another because it suits their business or suits their personality or whatever. They could be really against animal testing, and then this bank, which is really great with this ethical thing, it does they all have their pros and cons. So yeah, that sounds really cool.
That's a really important observation. So Triodos, who are the lowest carbon bank and refuse to invest in fossil fuels, are also Dutch owned and put a lot of money into dairy. The Dutch economy, pulls a lot in terms of dairy farming. So for a vegan, that might not be the best choice as a result of those investments. So it's a really important observation. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything's an ethical landmine. You can prioritize this or prioritize that.
Yeah, and we through the talks through the interviews, through listening to people going through this, that's what we really heard. So that one of the things we really aim to do is make that clear and give confidence to the client that we can navigate that ethical minefield.
Quagmire.
Yeah. Totally. Well, we're sort of coming to the end of time. Dan, is there anything else you want to say? Anything that you've not had a opportunity to mention before we close?
No, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and really big fan of Bob, what you're building at EnviroRental and the community that you're creating. So it's fantastic to be a 40-minute part of that. So thank you. If people want to get in touch, I kind of mentioned it, but go to our website, mymothertree.com. My email address, dan@mymothertree.com, and have a look on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Dan Sherrard-Smith. But yeah, those are the three things if people have additional questions.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much. It's been really insightful and informative. And I would encourage people, because a lot of people will be watching this video afterwards on YouTube, is go to Dan's guest blog. And we've done our own blog as well on finance. And you'll learn a lot more that will reinforce some of the messages you've heard today. please get in touch with Dan. He's a great guy, easy to chat to, and he'll be really keen to help you on your finance journey and removing carbon from your finance. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care all.
Thanks.
Bye.